Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I think if you could take a seat, we'd like to get started. Ladies and gentlemen, I know the conversations in between are just as productive often as the formal presentations, but we want to try to get you out on at least close to on time. So we have a very rich final panel to what has been a very rich day, obviously a very popular day. I tried to get into the luncheon panel and couldn't, so I had to watch you on television upstairs or on the web. You look very good on video as well. My name is Jeff DeBelco. I have the good fortune of directing our Environmental Change and Security Program and coordinating the Global Health Initiative here at the Wilson Center. And we, as junior partners in this effort with our Asia program colleagues, are just thrilled to see all of you and engaging in such a lively discussion. Thank so many of you who came from so far to join us in person for this. And thank you for sharing your insights. We're going to jump right into this final panel, which is entitled Elements of a Comprehensive and Sustainable National Strategy. We have 4 speakers. I'm going to be very brief, in fact, just tell you who they are and where they're sitting, so to speak, and rely on you to look at their bio statements. Suffice it to say, very rich in experience in tackling these issues. Sohail Agha is a Senior Technical Advisor at Population Services International, based in Karachi, and he will kick us off. Qazi Akawar is Head of Programs at the British Council in Islamabad. Mehtab Karim is a Senior Research Fellow at the Pew Research Center. And batting cleanup for the day is Scott Radloff, who directs the Office of Population and Reproductive Health at USAID here in the building. So perhaps the shortest commute to today's discussion. So we're going to start with the role of the private sector and turn the floor over to Sohail. However you like it. Mm-hmm.
Great. It's a great pleasure to be here today, talk about the private sector in Pakistan, something that I think there's a lot of interest in, but has been very little discussion of till now. I'm going to basically talk about 2 major strategies which have been implemented in the private sector for family planning and reproductive health in Pakistan since the late 1980s. This graph basically shows you contraceptive use amongst married women of reproductive age in Pakistan between 1975 and 2006. And these are findings from national surveys conducted in Pakistan during that period. What it essentially shows is that amongst reversible methods or modern methods of contraception, the condom is the only method which has shown a steady increase in use at the national level since 1975. It increased from about 1% in 1975 and went up to about 7% in 2006. And as I said, these are based on national surveys conducted in Pakistan during this period. Condom social marketing began in 1986. I think most of you are probably familiar with it. I don't need to get into a description of what that is. And its timing is kind of associated with the increase in condom use over this period. Other reversible methods showed a slower increase until about 2003. That's the IUD, injection and oral contraceptive, followed by a decline between 2003 and 2006. So overall, if you look at the trend in other modern methods, it's a very kind of a weak increase. What was the role of the private sector in terms of contributing to the increase of condoms? This information is from the 1990 and 2006 DHS surveys conducted in Pakistan. It shows that condom use increased from almost 3% amongst married women in 1990 to almost 7% in 2006. And the blue part of these bar graphs show the contribution of the private sector to the contraceptive use level. So in essence, 80% of that 2.7% contraceptive use was provided by the private sector in 1990, and the proportion remained about the same in 2006, so that the private sector contributed to 77% as a source of supply of the condom. And as we can see that the private sector was the driving force in terms of the increase in condom use, although the public sector also contributed to that increase. More recent information from the analysis of a condom social marketing campaign that was implemented in 2009 using household survey data, using pre and post test design with the latest statistical techniques using regression analysis, etc. We basically tried to look at the impact of a particular social marketing campaign on increases in condom use. And what this bar graph shows is that the folks who were exposed to the social marketing campaign conducted in 2009, among those folks there was a 10 percentage point increase in condom use as associated with the campaign. And similarly, procurement of condoms amongst those who were exposed to the campaign increased by 13 percentage points. So this is consistent. This micro level household individual behavior information is consistent with what we know at the macro level regarding trends in condom use from national surveys, that condom social marketing appears to have contributed to this increase and continues to do so. So the question which really I think comes up for us looking at the performance of the private sector is, why has the private sector not contributed to the increase of hormonal methods and the IUD? Or why has that contribution been relatively little? And that's really, I think, which is going to lead us into the second strategy that I'm going to discuss in a little bit, which is social franchising. And I think many of you might be familiar with it, but I'll give a brief description of this in a couple of slides. But for now, social franchising basically began in 1995 in Pakistan. And you can see that there was some increase in IUD use until 2003, followed by a decline in 2006, 2007. Similar pattern for oral contraceptives. Both of these methods are provided by the public sector as well as by the private sector. So the question is, why was the private sector not as strong in its performance in terms of the IUD and hormonal methods as it was in the case of condoms? If you look at the private sector's contribution to this growth in IUD use from 1990 to 2006, basically IUD use according to the 1990 DHS was 1.3%, very low, and by 2006 it increased to 2.3%. So very small increase in IUD use between 1990 and 2006, and we can see the private sector share to this growth, which increased from about 12% to about 44%. And most of this growth during this period is in fact associated with higher supply of IUD from the private sector. So yes, the private sector did contribute to IUD growth, but the growth itself was very anemic. And why is that? If you look at the social franchising model, to those of you who are not as familiar with it, basically the idea is that a franchise organization develops a branded network of private providers, and they are trained through the direct effect of the franchise organization is to train the providers professionally in terms of quality of service provision, in terms of the addition of family planning services to those providers who were not providing this service in the past. And these are primarily, this particular network that I'm going to talk about, these providers comprise of MBBS doctors as well as LHBs, and this particular network has about 7,000 such providers in its network. So the franchisor essentially does professional development of the providers. It provides a direct subsidy through subsidized contraceptives, and a very important role is advertising of the network and making women aware that there is a private sector provider who provides family planning services. That advertising in turn leads to greater brand equity in principle as it relates to the franchise, higher perception of quality from clients, and ultimately client volumes. But a very important aspect of higher client volumes is that the provider provides services which are of a good technical quality. We know that the quality of service provision in Pakistan for family planning, for hormonal methods and the IUD has been very weak. Women are often not counseled. Only a minority of women who are given these methods are actually counseled according to the DHS. So provider provides, in this agreement with the franchisor, the provider provides services at a certain standard of quality, and these are family planning services, And this is supposed to influence client satisfaction, increases in perception of quality, and client volumes and profitability. In the private sector, as we know, the primary driving force for changing behavior is the profitability. These are small businesses, often comprised of a lady health visitor in a single or two-room clinic, and even the MBBS doctors or the MDs, equivalent of the MDs here, they have basically running their business, and they are not reliant on the franchise for the income that they generate. They essentially are self-sustaining businesses which the franchisor has put into its network, trained to provide family planning services at a certain level of quality. So they are essentially independent functionaries who are part of the network but see some profit or potentially some profit in being part of this network, and that is what drives their behavior. So client volume or profitability is absolutely essential for the private providers to be able to increase the level of service provision of family planning in this model. Now, this data is based on a national survey of private providers that we conducted recently, and we just gotten data from it. And this survey was a survey of 500 clinics across Pakistan, representative sample of private providers, Green Star, or that's the network, and non-Green Star providers. And this basically, the model used was the service provision assessment studies which have been conducted by Macro International. So we used the same model and collected this data. And what it tells you something about the how did the network contribute to the experience level of the provider as well as the self-efficacy of the provider who was in the network. The bars in red show percentage of, on the left, the two set of bars on the left show the percentage of providers in the who inserted more than 45 IUDs in their career. In other words, it's a proxy for their level of experience. And what it does show is that the affiliation with the network was associated with about a 20 percentage point increase in the experience of the provider in inserting IUDs. In terms of self-efficacy, which is supposed to be an important component of the provider's confidence in both counseling people regarding the method and providing the method, the affiliation with the network was again associated with about a 9 percentage point increase in provider self-efficacy, which was measured by whether the provider considered themselves an expert in IUD insertion. So some indicators show that the network belonging to the network was associated with some positive indicators. The bars on the left again are showing basically it's a score of the provider's likelihood of recommending IUDs to potential clients in the case that there are no contraindications. And what it shows is that association with the network was again associated with a significant increase in the provider's likelihood of recommending the IUD to a client. But what is really interesting is when you look at provider behavior, which is the two bars on your right, in terms of this is provider self-reports of IUD insertion in a month. So what it shows is a weak relationship with actual IUD insertions. So essentially these bar graphs are showing you that the affiliation with the network was associated with only an increase of 1 IUD per month per provider. And that is a marginally significant relationship. Of course, a network such as this has 7,000 providers, so even 1 IUD is meaningful in terms of numbers, but nevertheless it's a modest effect on the behavior which is of greatest interest. Substantial effects on knowledge and intentions to actually recommend the IUD, but weak effects in terms of actual IUD insertions associated with the network. So what is going on? Why is this? Why is there an improvement in attitude amongst those who are associated with this network, but a relatively modest change in the behavior which is of greatest interest to us? If you look at the client flow to private sector clinics, and this bar chart basically gives you an idea of the proportion of clients who are coming to these clinics. In this case, there are 423 clinics which were part of our sample. the proportion of clients which are married women of reproductive age who are coming for different reasons. This gives you an idea of what people are coming to the private sector providers for. And essentially about half of the clients are for curative care. And interestingly, exactly about a third are for antenatal care. Several other reasons, including delivery, postnatal care, infertility counseling, laboratory tests, in some account for about 18% of the client. And family planning clients are only 4% of the clients coming to these private clinics are for family planning. So one suggestion that this data gives you is that people are coming to the private sector for what is important to them. Curative care is important, and their children, the birth of their children, the well-being is important. And family planning is not, there is not sufficient demand for the family planning to be supplied through the private sector. And that gives you an indication regarding provider behavior. The clients are not coming in sufficient numbers for the provider who is ready to provide the service to actually provide it. One alternative in this present scenario, because this particular network has several thousand providers in it, how do you increase the effectiveness of a network like this? And one potential area that we are exploring is performance-based financing, vouchers, which are essentially for women to get free service at these clinics, as well as a small compensation for transportation. So one particular project which was conducted, a small pilot project in urban Pakistan, in urban Punjab actually, showed that vouchers for facility delivery increased the proportion, the percentage of women who received the voucher. There was a 19 percentage point increase in facility delivery among those women who were given a voucher. And interestingly, although the main focus of the voucher was on facility delivery, there were also vouchers for family planning which were given to these women. And the voucher program was associated with a 10 percentage point increase in family planning use. And this is, again, at the same providers of this network that I've been talking about. A more carefully designed operations research study that we are currently doing also gives you a sense of how belonging to this network is associated, not just belonging to the network, but also the voucher intervention amongst network providers. How does that affect the knowledge and attitudes of the provider as well as provider behavior? And the first two bars are essentially, you've seen those before. They're basically telling you about the likelihood of recommending an IUD to a client who has no contraindication. The providers who are not in the network, they get a score of about 9. Providers in the network get a score slightly higher. And providers who are in the network and are part of the voucher program, they score the highest, and the difference is statistically significant. But what is really interesting is that the difference in behavior of the provider, not just knowledge, is much greater. So that, again, you've seen the first two, the blue and the red graphs before. What this shows is that providers who are part of the voucher program are insert about 5 more IUDs per month than non-network providers, and 4 more IUDs per month than network providers who do not have a voucher program. So it's highly suggestive that there are demand-side aspects. As you know, Pakistan is going through a very tough financial time. Food prices, inflation, everything. There's a very high, there's a real problem in terms of people's ability to finance visits to the health sector, and the voucher intervention appears to assist that. So, in sum, one other interesting thing is that, in fact, in Pakistan, there is a health financing program which is in place, and that is female sterilization. Because women who go to doctors either in the private or public sector, they get transportation reimbursement, and then they receive the service for free, which is essentially the same model as we have been using for facility delivery, which we have been piloting for facility delivery. So in fact, there is a health financing mechanism available at the national level for female sterilization. One other aspect of a couple of other aspects of this mechanism is that the motivator also is given some kind of stipend. But most important, I think, and this is very important for health financing mechanism, is monitoring. And for the female sterilization program in Pakistan, it's very strictly monitored. There's a lot of back-checking regarding whether women who supposedly received this service actually got it or not. So, and these are essentially components which go into health financing program, and each of them is important. It's not just the money, it's also the motivation, and it's the direction that health financing gives to the provider in terms of what is important. And if you look at female sterilization growth in Pakistan, it is actually the only method which since 1975 has grown more than the condom. So in 1975, female sterilization use was 1%, and it has increased to about 8% in 2006, 2007. So we do in fact have national level data showing that health financing in Pakistan has worked. If you look at the contribution of the public and private sectors to female sterilization, essentially the 1990 DHS showed that female sterilization was at 3%, it increased to 8%, and the growth by 2006, and the growth was driven largely by the public sector, but the private sector also, that's in blue, also contributed to the growth in female sterilization. So both sectors contribute to that growth, similar as you find in the case of condoms, because if you remember from the earlier graph, the majority of the contribution for condoms is social marketing, but the public sector also makes a significant contribution. So these are two private sector strategies which have been employed in Pakistan over the last 30 years. One of them, social marketing, shows a strong association with increases in condom use, and the other one, social franchising, doesn't. And I think the reason is that there has to be motivation for the provider to be able to provide services. These kinds of networks, as I mentioned, there are about 7,000 providers in this network, so there is a availability of a large number of skilled female providers to provide this service, but the demand generation has to go in. It has to be much stronger than what it has been in the past, and it has to promise something for the provider. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That really, as you say, brought the private sector into the discussion full square with rich data. Thank you so very much. So why don't we go straight to Shazia? And you have this. This one? You can either use this or there, whichever you prefer.
This is fine. Thank you. I'll be talking about a report that the British Council launched last year in November 2009, focusing on the perspective of Pakistani youth. And I'd take it from here.
Yeah. Just this button.
Thank you. Just like to start off with a quote from Kofi Annan. At the World Summit for Sustainable Development in Johannesburg, the Youth Caucus called on us to see young people as a resource, not a problem. How right they were. Young people are the most precious resource our planet possesses. Providing for youth is not just a moral obligation, it is a compelling economic necessity. Study after study has shown the benefits to the young and to their communities of investing in education, reproductive health, job skills, and employment opportunities for young people. The way I've structured my presentation today is an overview of the report, Pakistan, the Next Generation, using key messages from the report to highlight the youth perspective and how we've done that in the current policy dialogue scenario in Pakistan, addressing challenges facing young people in terms of a national strategy, basically recommendations which have come out from the report itself. We've been talking a lot about the demographic context since morning today, and the report starts from this, talking about how Pakistan today is at a critical moment in its history. The population is young, but it's steadily aging. Half of the population is below the age of 20. And Pakistan would gain considerable social and economic benefit from this window of demographic opportunity if young people are provided with adequate education, healthcare, and jobs. Then on the other end, we've also heard since morning about the danger of going into a situation where youth development in the country does not take place, where there is an underemployed baby boomer generation with few opportunities, and leading to social and political unrest. So therefore, the future of Pakistan's economic security, wider stability, is linked very closely to a better future for its younger generation. The critical point which we've discovered while working with young people in Pakistan is the lack of youth participation in development itself, and specifically lack of youth participation in policy development. Young people are consulted as a one-off consultation in the development of the policies, but there is no consistent participation by young people or an infrastructure which exists for this consultation to take place by young people during the development of the policy or the implementation. Therefore, there is a lack of what we call ownership amongst young people in implementing programs which are basically developed for them, but they don't have substantive input into the development of these programs. So what we're looking at is something which is beyond a general focus on youth empowerment itself, basically trying to involve young people in the policy development, in planning and implementation of its program. Looking at a situation where youth participation in development has to be mainstreamed. It's important for policymakers also to understand those for whom these policies are being developed, and for young people to own these policies and these interventions. So a quick look at the challenges for youth participation. In past, we've been looking at a flawed premise that youth are a problem waiting to be managed rather than a resource to be developed. And more initiatives are aimed at harnessing the physical energy of youth. If you look at the past youth policies or the draft youth policies, most initiatives are focused on things such as developing sports, for example, but the intellectual potential of youth and their power to mobilize and to act as social change agents remains totally untapped. Very few opportunities exist to strengthen participation in social and political domains. It's also important to understand the fact that huge number of young people in Pakistan do not have access or are not, it is not easy to access them. So it's important to seek and work with a broad range of young people, both through formal organizational structures and those who are outside of these structures as well. Explicit efforts have to be made to include those young people who face obstacles such as cultural norms, lack of opportunities, economic lack of access to information, and lack of skills as well. And when we look at researches which have identified, which basically create a profile of a young person in Pakistan, basically we come up with a young urban male, and these are the people who basically have better opportunities and for whom most of these interventions are focused. So what is the case for youth participation? Realizing past limitations, youth development frameworks are gradually moving away from the deficit model and looking at valuing young people for their potential, designing interventions which build their skills so that they can actively participate as adults in the implementation and development of policies and interventions which are of interest to them. And this approach basically considers young people through a more holistic lens, so addressing the broad range of their social, moral, emotional, physical and cognitive competencies. This cannot really happen unless we understand young people. We hear their voices, and we understand how what their viewpoints are while developing programs for them. In Pakistan, the shift to this paradigm of actually consulting young people, of trying to understand them, has been very slow. The Next Generation report takes a step towards understanding the perspectives, thoughts and aspirations of young people themselves and linking them up with the policy discourse. So, for example, in programs such as the British Council's youth program, the rationale of an advocacy, full-fledged advocacy campaign stems from a growing realization that there's a dearth of policy-based, research-based policy. And in general, when we look at youth-centered work. It is something which is cross-cutting across a number of sectors. So there's no specific focus on young people themselves. It is intersectorial, interdepartmental focus which we basically are looking at. So this it sort of dilutes the attention on young people and as a category in itself. It is more, for example, on health interventions or education interventions, but young people are not taken as young people. So, but recently there is a renewed vigor in the policy discourse and a growing realization that in order to reap what we're calling the demographic dividend, this is something which is not automatic. It has to be worked at, and it depends upon an informed policy environment. So quickly, I'll just talk a bit about the Next Generation report itself, which is an attempt to understand the young people of Pakistan better. Something about the methodology of how the report was prepared. We went through an initial survey which was conducted by Nielsen across the country, taking a sample of 1,500 young people, half of them which were illiterate. This was followed up with the qualitative research and therefore also supported by 3 papers which were commissioned to support the data which was already collected. Once an interim report was developed, this was put up on our website to ask some critical questions and to gain some more insight from young people themselves. During this process, there was an open source process. We came up with 1,500 responses from young people, and which were fed back into the report itself. Alongside this process, it was very what was interesting was the fact that the ownership of the report was not taken by the council. It was given to a group of task force members, as well as to all the people who actually contributed to the development of the report, including the young people who were part of the open source discussions. And you can find all the names at the back of the report if you have a look at it. We also included in the task force members people from the government, from the youth ministry, and there was discussion throughout with the youth ministry and other key stakeholders from the government on the development of the report itself. A quick overview of the results and the findings of the report. Some things which we've already discussed, that the country sits at a crossroads, and the Next Generation report argues that it is time for a fresh start. What did the young people themselves say? Most of the young people were very disillusioned in general with the situation in the country. They had very little faith in major institutions. A surprising result, considering what we've heard this morning, was the fact that only 33% of them actually believed in democracy. 60% of them said that the army is a more stable institution. And there were 33% approximately talked about the fact that they preferred the Sharia law. There was very little belief in the courts and the civil system within the country. However, what we really discovered from the report was the fact that they said that we don't like Pakistan, but we love it. They remained buoyed by their extremely positive sense of nationalism and belief in the country. They were highly civic-minded, and 92% of them very firmly believed in the fact that education is the solution to all problems in Pakistan, even though half of the sample was illiterate. There was some very clear everyday concerns regarding the merit system in the country, regarding the prevalence of corruption within the country, and they also saw Western interests in security as myopic. Some more findings. 3/4 saw themselves as primarily Muslims, as compared to 14% who said that they were Pakistanis. Half think that their qualifications were inadequate. Only 1/4 believed that they were sufficiently qualified or skilled to find jobs in the market. But again, something that we've been discussing in the morning as well, that they saw little point in being educated if there were no jobs, and a lot of the people, reinforcing what Moeed said in the morning, highly qualified or graduates were from our sample were people who were actually selling vegetables in the market, etc. There were concerns about corruption, favoritism, discrimination at work, gender, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, and disability. 32% viewed the purpose of education as to create good citizens, 50% that it was for understanding of the world. They believe that the reasons for violence, which they see around them every day in terms of security, are 30% injustice and 28% poor economic conditions. Most of them were quite critical of the international community for their interference in the country and for demonizing the population, but also very critical of its own government. Only 10% have high confidence in the national government. Some quotes from the open source. The war on terror and the corresponding instability in the country has gone a long way to isolate the Pakistani youth from the rest of the world. And one person said, "Stop treating us like an uncivilized bunch of hooligans who don't know anything." Another statement from one of the young persons who were who responded in the open source. 62 years back, there was a nation in search of a land. At present, there is a piece of land in search of a nation. So what are the development challenges that the report has highlighted? Some, again, which we've been hearing about quite a bit since this morning. 85 million more population by 2030, which is about 5 more the population size of Karachi at this point. 50% will be living in cities by 2030. 70% of children at this point do not go to secondary school. 6.8 million children are not in primary school. And 36 million more jobs are needed in the next 10 years to support the demographic bulge. But at the end of it, there were some hopeful messages emerging from the report itself about the future. The most hopeful message was the strength of the voices of the next generation. We had a huge response from these young people, and not only during the work done on this report, but in the work done in the last 3 years, which we've worked with about 15,000 young people directly and hope to work with 12,000 more this year. The young people are very very inspiring, really. They are very hopeful about the future of the Pakistan. They want to contribute, but there is a lack of infrastructure. There is a lack of opportunities for them to tap into any meaningful contribution to the development of the country. With the country at a perilous point in history, many young leaders are determined to play their part in building a brighter future for Pakistan. The next generation is obviously a powerful force for change and change agents if they get the opportunity to become to take on this role. And only by harnessing its energy can a new Pakistan be born, one which is able to overcome the challenges that the future will bring. So how have we taken these messages forward? What we've been trying to do in the last nearly 8 months now is to formulate some initiatives and specifically start talking at a sort of a policy level to leaders of the country and see how we can connect young people with people who actually are creating these policies for them. We've developed a national partnership forum on citizenship and national volunteering. This is about 45 participants, organizations, including the government sector, including media, civil society organizations, and the private sector, basically focusing on talking about, provides a platform for experience sharing to its members on promoting youth empowerment and also creating advocacy for young people. Young people are also a part of this forum itself. The first thing that the forum is now doing is helping the Ministry of Youth Affairs and the National Volunteering Movement draft a volunteerism policy for approval, for putting up for approval to the Cabinet this year. We've got a partnership with the Ministry of Youth Affairs, which is trying to facilitate an interministerial coordination committee for the delivery and the implementation of the youth policy. It's extremely important to understand the fact that that there are different departments in different sectors delivering programs for young people, but there is a lack of coordination amongst these and lack of integration. It was very surprising to find that there is a huge amount of data available in different sectors with regards to young people, but it is not integrated and it is not used in a manner which holistically can be used to develop combined strategies or policies. The first meeting has already taken place, and what we're looking at is seeing how more better integration and synergy can be created amongst different departments, focusing on initiatives for young people. Another initiative which has recently been discussed and is going to take place is placing 65 young internees from the National Internship Program of the Ministry of Youth Affairs with standing committees at the National Assembly, thus providing them with an opportunity to be a part of the political system or to gain a better understanding of the political system itself. There were, as a result of when the report came out, we were asked by the Planning Commission to hold a seminar, a joint seminar, based on the findings of the report on the demographic transition, investing in the next generation. This took place in February with the then Finance Minister and more than 100 participants from various government departments are part of it. The minister basically said that a paradigm shift was required to fully address the demographic dividend, and other speakers pointed out the need for intersectorial coordination if any progress has to be made. Speaking at the seminar, Professor Gavin Jones talked about generating a passion for education in the Pakistani population at large if any change has to be brought about. We are also looking at policy discourse with the Young Parliamentarians Forum, which is basically 95 National Assembly members who form the Young Parliamentarians Forum, and seeing how we can start a series of discussions and debates between young people and the YPF starting from September this year, in order to harness their support to address issues and to actually start a conversation between youth itself and them and the government. We are also working with the media to start a series of youth programs which will begin in January 2011, highlighting young people who are actively involved in bringing about a change in their communities through community engagement and advocacy. The report also came up with a number of recommendations, suggestions for addressing the challenges and how the challenges that we've just discussed, and how we can actually take Pakistan into the future and support in a positive manner. Firstly, Pakistan needs a long-term vision for the next generation. What we've had so far are a series of short-term initiatives or ad hoc bits of initiatives taking place. So, and times of crisis really drives short-term thinking, but what we urgently need to do is to switch towards a much longer-term program. Looking at young people as the highest priority in the country. So a very strong commitment from senior leaders starting from the top. Heads of all major opposition parties and leaders from the private sector, from the civil society, the media, the academia. What we are really looking at is a movement within the country, focusing on the young people, talking about and pledging and holistically pledging themselves to an agenda to support the development of young people in the country, therefore really supporting the development of Pakistan itself. Mainstreaming youth participation in development. Young people said that the government should provide windows for the engagement of youth in the decision-making process. And another statement was, no decision about us without us. So there is a huge amount of interest there. They are ready to participate in the national agenda if given the opportunity. And by mainstreaming youth participation in development, by involving them not only in the implementation of interventions, but also in the planning of the policy itself, giving them ownership, that is what is required. A major challenge that we've been facing is delivery should be integrated across all policy issues. And unless there is synergy between sectors, gaps will continue to exist. We've got education policies, youth policies, employment policies, but implementation is generally disappointing. So the next step really is to put young people at the heart of every government policy and to build a national mission for a new Pakistan. One thing, youth policy, for example, or the youth ministry does not have a very high priority at this point in time. There is a youth policy which was passed last year after a lot of debate, after decades of debate, but it's not very clear as to whether that will become a small segment of the broader program within the government, or whether that it's going to have any impact. The international community must live up to its responsibility, and over the past decades, there has been an obsession young people feel with security, which has done nothing to make Pakistan a better place to live in. And it is really now is the time for international community to invest in Pakistan's future, and to actually start having a conversation with the young people there. We've also heard this morning about the perception that young people and others in Pakistan have about the international community, and this is where the role of the international community really comes in, is to start to have a conversation to see whether that perception can actually be changed. Some priorities which really we need to look at, and we've talked about this before. The first priority is to invest in young people themselves. So we're talking about quality education. And without the education, young people or Pakistan is not going to achieve its potential. Second priority is to release the economic potential of the young. So we're looking at about 36 million jobs in the next decade to equip the youth with skills demanded by the global economy, and also looking at equipping many young women so that they find employment opportunities. Helping young people to become active citizens. So next generation challenges can only be solved if young people themselves are actively participating in the development of the country at all levels of society, with a fresh generation of leaders which we need to have coming up in positions of authority as soon as they demonstrate their worth. So there is fresh energy at the grassroots level which really needs to be tapped into. At the end of the report, we had a group which is very active in the country, giving us a contract, asking us to put a contract with the policymakers in the report itself. And what they said was, what young people can expect from their society and what their country expects them to deliver in return is a sort of contract that we should have with the young people. And what they felt was that so far the next generation has been failed by its leaders. So what it really needs is solemn and binding commitment that this will now change. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So we started with the private sector and had this rich discussion of youth. We're going to turn now to Mehtab, who is going to talk about a demographic scenario and the comparison with Bangladesh and Iran. Let me help you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Woodrow Wilson Center. No, that's not.
Okay.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, my topic has already been, I shouldn't say preempted, so I'll, in the sense of, let's see. Okay, that's it. Yeah. Thank you very much, Woodrow Wilson Center, Bob and Michael. And when Michael contacted me about a couple of months back that he's having this conference, I was delighted. And I was more than delighted that so many good speakers were included, including my old friend Zeba Sathar. And she started the ball rolling this morning by talking about various issues which are confronting Pakistan's demographic scenario. What I mentioned that, listen, I've been away from Pakistan for the last 2 years and working mainly on the Muslim demographics, looking at Pakistan in the global context of Muslim demography, so I would like to talk about that. So I just want to throw in some numbers. as demographers always do. So please pardon me, and I know that this is the time when most of you must be very tired looking at those numbers, but you have to bear with me because I have my presentation and I have to present it. Okay, so and some of the stuff might be a repeat, so again, my apologies. But starting with something which is very important, at least for many think tanks here in Washington, that Muslim population growing very fast, one of the fastest growing religion in the world at the moment, demographically, not through conversion, by the way, and which has grown about quite a bit from less than a billion in about 20 years ago to 1.6 billion. So that's a large number of people being added as Muslims, and they're all over, by the way, in America also, in Europe. But they're not all troublemakers. There's some good people, many of them scholars, like the presentations you heard. So from there, I start, and I'd like to go from a very macro perspective to very micro, and ending up with Pakistan through Indonesia, Bangladesh, and whatever you heard in the morning. So let me go through quickly. Pakistan has a very unique demographic stature in the Muslim world. Amazingly, that it's the first country which started a family planning program, as you heard. But even with that family planning program, it started about more than 45 years ago. Contraceptive prevalence is low. Family planning has not been accepted the way it has been accepted in more than half of the 50 Muslim majority countries. And it's shown by the fact that Pakistan's population has been growing and is still going to grow. About 3.5-fold increase between 1980 to 2030. As compared to the other major Muslim countries, 2 folds in Indonesia, 2.5 folds in Turkey, 2.4 folds in Bangladesh, 2.5 folds in Iran, and 2.7 folds in Egypt. So Pakistan is much ahead in the race, and that's going to be in the next 30 years or so. So much so that it will be the largest Muslim country. We are just projecting the population of all the countries around the world, and Pakistan will supersede that of Indonesia as the largest Muslim country. So that's where we stand. Okay. Now, where are we coming from and where we are going? That's very interesting. If you do compare Pakistan's population with some of the countries or group of countries, it's very interesting. Only about 30 years ago, Pakistan had a population of 77 million. Small. That's what Niger and Nigeria together were. That was the combined population of Egypt, Algeria, and Morocco. And Bangladesh was, of course, ahead of Pakistan, and so was Turkey and Iran combined together. And, of course, Indonesia, big country, 137, 39 million people. But in the next 20 years, the things are going to change drastically. So much so that in 1980, Pakistan had 61 million or 60 million, depends what numbers you're talking about. Pakistan is always on to, they're very modest. They'll tell you we are 170 million, although we are 185 million. They like to hide a few things here and there. And that's the reason they don't conduct census very regularly, because census would reveal things, and even they do conduct census, they are undercoms, and they don't accept that for many reasons, mainly political reasons. But given what the numbers are, as given by the United Nations, and I do agree with Mr. Shahid, Javed, Burki more than Dr. Zeba Sathar, that's the number which United Nations throws in, and Dr. Nizam is a witness because he's worked for the United Nations for many years, that the numbers are disputed. We have some problems in showing that how many we are. At least we are not in burqa, we are somewhat covered during. So the numbers are has to be reconciled with, and I would request the Planning Commission member that please look at it. That when we are projecting the numbers, we are projecting Pakistan's future population, or the government of Pakistan is, with a base of 170 million in 2010, which is not, really shouldn't be that way. And I think our demographers who live in Pakistan should convince them that they have to change the base. Anyways, From Indonesia, go to Bangladesh. In 1980, Bangladesh had 9 million more people than Pakistan. Today, we have 20 million more than Bangladesh. I don't know how many of you have heard this, but that was the factor why Bangladesh became independent, or East Pakistan became independent of Pakistan, when they had a population of 45 or 55%, as compared to West Pakistan, which had a population of 45%. And they were asking for one man, one vote, which was not given, and so they said, goodbye. Now the situation is reversed, what I call the demographic turnaround. If you put the two countries together, they would be 45%, and what used to be West Pakistan would be 55%. And we have talked a lot about Bangladesh. Perhaps it's the time that we should invite them to rejoin us for demographic reasons, because they could perhaps bring down our fertility level. Pakistan had already, long time back, replaced Bangladesh as the 7th largest country, and now it has replaced Russia as the 6th largest country. And as I said earlier, very soon, it depends what numbers you take, it's going to supersede that of Indonesia as the largest Muslim country. So that's something which we have to bear in mind. And just to, as demographers like to show you graphics, I can't get very good graphics, but what I have done, that Pakistan is in race with two West African countries, Niger and Nigeria together. Perhaps, at least Niger is one of the poorest countries in the world. And if you look at the numbers, this all started with about 76, 77 million people in 1980. See where they're going. So if you compare Pakistan with Niger, Nigeria, Egypt, Algeria, Morocco, Iran, Turkey, combined population, and Bangladesh, Pakistan is ahead of them in the number game. And very soon would be close to Indonesia, which was much, much ahead, as I said, that there were about 50 million more people in Indonesia earlier. And so it's getting very, very close. I think by 2040, it would exceed the population of Indonesia. So that's where we are coming from. Now, going back to what demographers talked about the Muslims. I wanted to bring it back because Pakistan is proving them right. What was being written in the 1970s when some of us were graduate students, not all of you because many young people are on, that, one of the first reports written by Dudley Kirk, a sociologist, he says the Muslim population tended to have high fertility, and there was no evidence of any decline in the near future. Gradual decline, but not, he thought that it won't be. And as long as about 20 years ago, a report prepared by the Population Reference Bureau, they said, well, the nation of Islam are characterized by higher than average fertility and rapid rates of population growth. And the author thought that it's not going to go down. But things did change, drastically change in the 90s. Many countries in the Muslim world, starting with Iran, a 62% decline in 10 years. Algeria, Tunisia, Syria, Bangladesh, they all became leaders in fertility decline, about between close to 50%, 45 to 50%. But during the same time, Pakistan, a very modest decline, if we accept that it did decline. Maybe many people believe that the figures which came out in the DHS 1990-91 were not that correct, but still there was 15% decline. So Pakistan has been left behind by the countries which it was supposed to lead in terms of at least demographic transition because of the earliest family planning program it generated. So I did some analysis with looking at the demographic and health survey data, the surveys conducted in 1990s, and out of the 12 countries which I looked at, which had Muslim majority population, Pakistan and Yemen were the two exceptions. And why I wanted to bring it Yemen and a couple of other countries here, because what I found that If you look at some of the literature available on Pakistan's what's the reason why family planning has not taken off, and many of the planners, our planners, even our researchers would say, hey, this is Islam, this is Muslims, they want to grow fast, as was the theory, as I put in our, the suggestion which came from Dr. Kirk. But in a review of a chapter in a book which I did with Gavin Jones, I thought it's not true. It's a very Islam, as the writings in Quran and Hadith, which is the sayings of the Prophet, there's quite a bit of support to birth control, family planning, abortion even, which I'm surprised that it's still illegal in Pakistan and most of the Muslim world. But there have been a lot of support to, but we have not taken cue from there. Who has taken the cue? I'll come back to that. But before I go do that, these are the 46 countries which are Muslim majority for which trend data are available. There are 50 altogether. And very interestingly that in 1960 till 1980s, very high, most of them had total fertility rate, which is the average number of children a woman is expected to have, or we call average family size, whatever you want to call it, that they had, most of them were in the high regime of fertility, very high fertility rates. But you look at, as you come closer to 90s or 2000 and 2000, this decade, it's surprisingly that there has been drastic decline, and unfortunately Pakistan is not one of them, where fertility level has come down below 30. Out of 46 countries, about 20 of them have total fertility rate, average number of children born per woman is less than 3. So that's a drastic change which have occurred in the Muslim world. And how, if you want to see some graphics, it looks like this, that in Asia, Central Asia and South Asia, Pakistan and Afghanistan are two exceptions. Here is Afghanistan and here is Pakistan somewhere. Yep, the highest one here. Huh? Anywhere. And then in the Middle East, the only exception is Yemen, where fertility has not declined. And of course, in North Africa, the exceptions are Somalia and Djibouti, a small country where fertility has not declined. And of course, West Africa is a different scenario where fertility has not declined anywhere in most cases. So I often say that Pakistan and Afghanistan got Taliban because of high fertility, and Somalia, Yemen got what you call Al-Qaeda, and Somalia got pirates. So that's something very important to see this. Does it have any impact, the non-decline of fertility, what I say? So one of the consequences which Shazia already talked quite a bit about, and that's what, since I've been working on this project, right, a few minutes, okay, that because of that constantly high fertility in Pakistan, this is a leader, again, in number of and proportion of young people. Just look at the population below age 13, below age 5, 13%, as compared to all other countries in the who are sort of in the same fraternity, the largest Muslim countries, and especially if you look at the youth, another problem there. But besides going into the number, the number is important, but what are they doing is also important. So we have about, as compared to all other countries, very high net primary enrollment ratio. Pakistan is still far behind. And as the enrollment years are increasing, from primary to secondary, it goes down drastically, and to the tertiary level, it goes almost getting close to zero. 3% are enrolled in colleges. And that's what the problem is, what Shazia was talking about a while ago. So that's where we are at, and that's the scenario. Okay. Now, what do we have? Any lessons to learn from there? There have been a lot of discussions going on in the press, and one of someone I met this afternoon who works quite a bit, does quite a bit of work on youth and violence, and that's where we are looking at. Moeed talked about it this morning, But that's where we are at. Now, can we learn anything from our two neighbors or close by, because we don't have good relations with our neighbor. But if we can go a little further to the east and farther to the west, we don't have good relations with both the immediate neighbors, by the way. So I had to look for some good neighborly countries, Bangladesh and Iran. And so in Iran, I'm sure that many of you have studied Iran and have gone there. Drastic change has occurred in Iran. Immediately after the revolution, Mr. Khomeini's revolution, first he thought that no, family planning is a no-no, but eventually within 2-3 years they made a drastic change. He gave a fatwa that family planning is allowed in Islam, and the changes which occurred there, they say that within the Sharia law, family planning is allowed, and they go on and on, doing everything. I don't have enough time to do that, but the paper, Michael, I think the paper is much longer than my presentation, but I have some good description of Iran there. And so, what does a well-known scholar from Iran say? That prevention of pregnancy is not forbidden in Islam as long as it is done with the consent of the couple, does not expose them to any harm, or requires action inconsistent with religion, it is permissible. So they have taken a view that and so you will see that what happened in Iran. In Bangladesh, of course, Bangladesh broke up with an Islamic Republic of Pakistan, so that it couldn't take the Islamic line, but Family Planning Association of Bangladesh played an important role in mobilizing the religious leadership. They trained them, and they asked them to go and talk about how much support is there to family planning in Islam, and they did their job, of course, with support from the government program and NGOs, which is both very weak in Pakistan, unfortunately. In Pakistan, we have completely different scenario. General Ayub Khan, army general, dictator, he started a modernization program under which family planning was. He was a staunch supporter, but at the same time, Mr. Maududi, the founder of Jamaat Islami Party, he vehemently opposed it. And when General Zeba A, he came up, he ruled for another general, came in for 11 years, I believe, that he took the line of Jamaat Islami, because that was his main support. And his council, they call it Islamic Ideological Council, where he put up the case whether family planning is Islamic or not. And what the judgment said, that took the stand that family planning is a national policy, can never be reconciled with Islamic teaching. So they completely took about the same time when Mr. Khomeini's regime was talking about that family planning is very Islamic, Pakistani Ideological Council or Islamic Ideological Council was just talking the other way around. Of course, things have changed quite a bit since then, and Dr. Zeba Sathar did talk about it. The role of religion has been subsided substantially, but unfortunately, it is, in a survey done in 2000 by National Institute of Population Studies of about 1,000, what they call Pesh Imam, they're the prayer leaders in all over the country. 80% of them thought that there's no provision, family planning is against Islam. So that's very interesting that our government has not been able to convince the religious leadership that what they're talking about is non-Islamic in a way, I would say. Okay, so of course, things have not changed much, as you heard this morning, that the things are quite a bit standstill over the last 10 years. For example, you could see this multicolor graphs, which shows that contraceptive prevalence rate has not gone up at all during the last 10 years. It has still at about 30%, 28%, 29%, something. I don't know what we would have done without Sohail Agha's outfit. They are the one who are providing all the contraceptive, I believe, to the population. So, and on the other hand, Iran shows tremendous increase, and so does Bangladesh over the past many years, especially during the more recent years. And consequently, as I showed the larger graph, but here it's very interesting that Pakistan, Iran, and Bangladesh started about the same level in the 60s and came down tremendously, both the countries, during the 1990s, and Pakistan is still struggling about 4 children. 3.9 is the same, because you cannot have 0.1 children less, okay? So it's 4, it's still 4, okay? So that's where we stand. Coming to a very macro situation, Iran has done it because mullahs did it, okay? The government had full support. It's a rich country. Education was already there during the Shah's time. Level of education in Iran had gone up already. So I come to a country which Pakistanis at least, and they thought that, oh, it's a basket case. Bangladesh is not going to survive in 1972, 71. And it is not still, unfortunately, Bangladesh, the economic situation, if these are the indicators of economic or social indicators, it has not done very well. Much literacy rate is not that high. Then Pakistan, if you look at the availability of certain items such as television or electricity or what is it, the middle one, something? Telephone, something. Pakistan is much, much better off. And so, in every respect, they are much better off. But when it comes to demographic indicators, Bangladesh is still very much behind. Dr. Zeba talked about age at marriage. Just look at that. Mean age at marriage of 15, less than 14 years in Bangladesh. Pakistani women get married about 3.5 years later. 81% of women in Bangladesh, they get married before age 16. Only 35% do in Pakistan. And so, but still, when we talk about, then we look at the average number of children born by age, they start early, and therefore they have some higher number of children at younger ages. But as comes to age 20, 25, that's a peak, then they just stop childbearing, not childbearing, or at least they start thinking about childbearing. Because when you look at that, very interestingly, that's perhaps one of the few countries, I think it's in Asia, true. I've looked at all the Asian data from DHS. 23% of Bangladeshi women who have no children, they are using contraceptives. As against, I would say none, 0.5% in Pakistan. And so that's and so only it picks up when they have, 3 to 4 or 5 children. Another very interesting example coming from Bangladesh, it's an outreach, basically, what I'm suggesting, that there's no difference between rural and urban areas. And if you look at the women's education, it's almost the same, whether they are illiterate or whether they are, post-secondary educated, and whether they are poorest of the lot or they are richest of the lot, they have the same level of contraceptive use. I need to go back. I think I just wanted to show Pakistan's situation. And in Pakistan, you see, as I think Dr. Zeba has already talked about this, that the contraceptive use is only high among when the women are more educated or when they are richer. So that's where the problem lies. And I would request Dr. Agha's, Green Star, that go and work with these women and men who are poorest of the poor and who are less educated, because that's where contraception is needed. Okay. So in conclusion, I think I've already said many things, but what I'm suggesting that Pakistan is one of the exceptions in the Muslim world where fertility has not declined. Religion is no more an important force in keeping fertility high in most of the part of the world, with the exception of West Africa, where Christianity and Islam both are in competition with each other, I think, because both of them, women in both the religions, have about the same number of children. But Pakistan is, as I said earlier, that it is doing better off as Sub-Saharan Africa, Yemen in the Middle East, and Afghanistan in South Asia. Even Nepal is doing better in terms of contraceptive use and fertility decline. So what the last slide says, that we have to learn from our Muslim brothers, or Pakistan has to learn from Iran, or brothers and sisters, rather sisters is also very important, that Iran and Bangladesh provide a very good example of how a successful family planning program could be implemented. And Bob said it very right, that we have good policy but no implementation. And so I'm repeating that, I'm conveying it to everyone that were your words, but I also put it on the slide anyways before that. So, so what basically the thing is that a good family planning program could be implemented in a religiously oriented society, very restrict one like in Iran, or in a poor country like Nepal, Bangladesh, and Pakistan could learn the lesson from either of the two or both of them together. And so that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor. We'll turn, as I said, last but certainly not least, to Scott Radloff from USAID's Office of Population and Reproductive Health. And I think...
Good. Okay, I'm the last presentation of the day. And when you're last, you often risk repeating things that others have said. But I only just arrived for this session, so I probably won't even know what I'm repeating. So at USAID, under the Global Health Initiative, Pakistan is a priority country for maternal child health and family planning. It's a country that has high need for family planning, high unmet need, and also high rates of maternal and child mortality. Is this forward?
Yep.
Okay. This compares some of the indicators between 1990 and 2006-07. Modern contraceptive prevalence, have you seen in other slides, has gone up from 9% to 21%, and so that's about a 12-point increase. But because that's over that's about a 17 or 18-year period, it's less than 1 point increase per year. And when we look across at successful family planning programs, we usually think that a successful program can achieve a 1 point increase and perhaps a 2 point increase per year. So this is below what you would expect of a successful program. You can see that traditional contraceptive prevalence has increased from 3 to 8%. And then unmet need, which is the percent of women who say they want no more children or want to space their next birth 2 or more years and aren't using a method of family planning. And you see that that's declined from 32% to 25%. But I would argue that you really need to combine the unmet need with traditional prevalence, traditional being maybe not true unmet need, but undermet need or mismet need. So if you combine those two, there's really no change at all in the broader term of unmet need. The percent of total demand satisfied by a modern method has increased from 21% to 40%. And total demand for family planning has increased from 43 to 54, 55%. So this captured data from the UN Population Division and their estimates of total fertility rates over 5-year periods. And I have in the first panel on top the 30-year period from 1950 to 1980, and then the second panel, which is the bolded one, the total fertility rates from the 30-year period, 1980 to 2010. And one thing to note is that between 1950 and 1980, virtually no change in total fertility rate. It hovers around 7 children per woman. And at the same time, if you look at total annual births, they about double, 1.5 million births per year, increasing to 3.2 million births per year by 1980, so a doubling. And then we look at the 1980 to 2010 period, and we see some progress in total fertility rate declining from 6.6 to 4.0. and that's a 39% decline. Births continue to increase, annual births from 3.8 to 5.2, but at a slower rate than in the earlier period. You can see in the bottom panel here, it shows the percent increase over this period. So it doubled, 100% increase over this period, and over this period it slowed, 39% increase. Okay, this puts the Pakistan side by side. So the same data I just showed, the same data I just showed for Pakistan on this previous slide, I've added in the comparable data from Bangladesh. And in this, the first 30 years, virtually identical. No change in TFR over this 30-year period, and annual births about doubling over this time. But a different trend in the following 30 years, from 80 to 2010. And you can see that total fertility rate declines quite dramatically. In fact, it's a 60% decline, as opposed to Pakistan's 39% decline. And then the total number of births also stabilizes and actually declines a little bit over this period. So stabilization of births. And I want to say one thing about this is that we know that fertility is closely related to maternal mortality. And there are several ways in which that happens. One is that obviously just by cutting the total fertility rate in half, it means that the number of times a woman is exposed to a risk of maternal mortality or morbidity is cut in half. And then secondly, when you double the number of annual births over time, then you need a health system that keeps up with that growth. And you can see in the case of Bangladesh, it's stabilized over the last 30 years. So that gives the health system a chance to catch up with services and maybe to improve quality of services. So there's another way in which fertility can impact on maternal mortality. And then, of course, a third way is better birth spacing. We know that by delaying your first birth until after age 18, ideally, also lengthening the spacing between births to 2 or more years, ideally 3 or more years, that can have a dramatic impact on maternal mortality and child mortality. So what does those different trends mean? How do they translate to population growth? And so this shows the total population, and we've seen other slides like this today. The two countries are about the same size, and then we have actually Bangladesh increasing a little bit more rapidly in these early years. This is 1950, by the way, and then by about 1985 they kind of cross. And because of the fertility, the more rapid fertility decline, Bangladesh continues on a lower trajectory, and Pakistan continues higher. And this is these projections into the year 2050 is taken from the UN POP division. And most of the differences between these two trajectories is just due to the different trends in total fertility rate, the fertility decline. So Bangladesh reached a TFR of 3.0 in 2001, and according to these projections, Pakistan will reach a TFR of 3.0 by 2021. So just the impact of that delay, that 20-year delay in reducing fertility will result in a population by 2050, about 100 million population difference. So those fertility trends also translate into age structure effects. And I was going to show a bunch of age pyramids or population pyramids, but it would have been about 50 of these to go through to show you the impacts. So I tried to give a summary of the age structure just by median age. Oops, sorry. Every time I hit the wrong one. So I take the median age in selected countries, and you can see Pakistan here, along with Yemen, Egypt, Bangladesh, Indonesia, Korea. And so Korea is the country that had the earliest fertility decline, and consequently it reaches a median age over 25 in the year 1990. So it was the first country among these sets to hit a median age of 25. And I used 25 to mark the as a demarcation point because it's a median age that corresponds to both a demographic dividend and also better state stability. So that's kind of what Richard Cotter refers to as the sweet spot. Once you hit 25 as the median age, you have higher stability and you have better economic growth potential. So you can see that Korea reached it first in 1990. Indonesia reached it in the year 2000. Bangladesh reached it, will reach it by, right around now, 2010 or 2011. And then Egypt will reach that in 2015, and Pakistan will reach it in 2025, according to the median projection of the POP division. And then just to show you that there are countries that are lagging further behind, Yemen, according to the UN, will reach that sweet spot in the year 2040. This is a scatter plot of total fertility rate and maternal mortality rate. So TFR here going from 8 down to 1, and then on this axis we see maternal mortality rate. So back in 1980, Bangladesh had the higher maternal mortality rate compared to Pakistan, and you can see that by 1990, as fertility declined fairly dramatically in Bangladesh, maternal mortality rate came down quite dramatically as well. And Pakistan came down a bit, but not as dramatically. And then by the year 2000, continued decline in Bangladesh on both scales, maternal mortality and total fertility, and then slower progress on maternal mortality for Pakistan. But you can see by the year 2008, Bangladesh has achieved not only a lower fertility, but also a lower maternal mortality. And part of that is, I would argue, are perhaps better maternal mortality programs, safe delivery programs, maternal programs. But part of it also is this impact of total fertility rate that I mentioned before on maternal mortality. Okay, these next sets of slides just shows that relationship between mother's age and maternal mortality. And you can see that as the mother's age increases, maternal mortality rises. And looking at the slide just before I came here, I realized that there's not for some reason, there's not a 15 to 19 age group in here. And I think if we'd had a 15 to 18 age group, you'd see that higher too. Usually these are U-shaped. So you get higher survival probabilities in these middle ages and then higher risks of maternal mortality in the youngest and the oldest ages. This shows the perinatal mortality rate also by age. And here you can see kind of that U-shaped function here. So the highest risks for perinatal mortality in when the woman is under age 20, and higher also in the higher age groups. And then this shows birth spacing, and the higher newborn mortality rate associated with births that are spaced less than 2 years apart. And this is under 5 mortality. You can also see, again, under 2 years carries higher under 5 mortality risks. So the good news for Pakistan over this 17-year period is that we know that fertility did decline, but it also declined mainly in these high-risk ages. So the biggest declines, this is age-specific fertility rates, the biggest declines are in age 15 to 19, which carries the highest risk of maternal and child mortality, and it occurs down here in these older ages too. So those are trends that will impact on maternal and child mortality. And we know from the DHS data that births to women under 18 has declined. This is the percent of first births to women under 18 from about 30 to 23%, or 21% decline. Birth spacing 3 or higher, actually very little change, no change at all really. What I need to do is look at 2 years or higher. We might see some more dramatic change, maybe with 2 years birth spacing. And these are births order 5 or higher also decline. And we know that that high order births also carry with them higher risks of mortality. So why the difference in Pakistan and Bangladesh? Well, I think a number of people have alluded to Bangladesh had a very strong and active family planning program with strong government commitment and strong donor support, strong and continuous donor support. This graph shows what we call the family planning program effort scores. This is something that John Ross and some others have done periodically since 1972. And what they do is they go out to all the countries and get scores on the, have key informants provide their estimation on the strength of the family planning policies, services, evaluation, and method access to the various family planning methods. And so these are the average scores for Bangladesh in the red here. I'm sorry. In the blue here is Bangladesh, and in the red is Pakistan. You can see that actually Pakistan had the stronger program in 1972. I'm sorry, did I say that right? Yeah, Pakistan had the stronger program, but by 1982, you can see the effect of the strengthened program in Bangladesh, and it remained higher. The way in which they calculate these scores changed in 1999, so these don't connect exactly. But I mean, you see the general pattern is that stronger family planning programs in Bangladesh over this period. As I said, it's also Bangladesh benefited from having continuous donor support. I've captured only USAID here, but obviously there are other donors supporting the Bangladesh program. But this shows you, well, it shows you a couple of things. One, it shows you that even in Bangladesh, there's some amount of volatility in the funding levels. This is for USAID's family planning support to Bangladesh. But if you did a sort of a smoothed average, you'd see it coming in around $25 million per year. And I think for much of this period, it was one of the highest funded programs in the world for USAID. And then you see for Pakistan, we had some level of program support, lower support, and then there's this period of 10-year period of time, 1992 to 2002, when it was essentially it was zeroed out, and that was because of the Pressler Amendment, which prevented us from providing any development assistance over this period. And you can see then that in 2002, we began to be able to work again in Pakistan, and we've actually had fairly dramatic increases in funding. So we're hopeful that that combined with increased government support and commitment that we may see good progress going forward. And we still continue to fund Bangladesh at a fairly healthy level. So I just have a few more slides. This is a slide that I put together for any country. I'm looking at what's happening with family planning. And what it does is it shows in the blue part of the bar, modern contraceptive use, in the red part of the bar, traditional method use, and in the yellow part of the bar, unmet need. And this one is broken out by wealth quintiles. And so what you can see is that as you move from the, and this is from the last survey, 2006-2007 in Pakistan, you can see that as you go from the poorest quintile to the wealthiest, you see an increase in modern method use, and that's fairly typical. What you also see is a fairly dramatic growth in traditional method use. So that you don't see everywhere. It's usually more even or even more readily found in the poorer quintile. So that's kind of an unusual pattern, I think. But anyway, the unmet need then runs the opposite direction. So the highest unmet need is actually in the poorest quintile. So on top here I have the percent of the total need being satisfied. And it's only 27% for the poorest. It's 50% for the wealthiest. So there's potential progress in each of these quintiles, but especially in the poorest quintiles. So strategies for getting services out to the poorer segments of the population are important for Pakistan. And this shows the same bar graph, modern, contraceptive, traditional method, unmet need, but by residence, major city, other urban, and rural. And you can see that as you move to more urban, higher contraceptive prevalence, but the unmet need runs the other direction, higher unmet need in the rural. We're meeting 35% of the demand in the rural, 50% in the major cities of Pakistan. So just a few points here on key program interventions in Pakistan. One is strengthening both the Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Population and Welfare, strengthening their services, improving contraceptive supply and logistics, as we say, no product, no program, expanding community-based services through the Lady Health Workers and Community Midwifery Program, building private sector partnerships with the government is important, strengthening social marketing, Green Star being an example, scaling up best service delivery practices, including adding family planning to postpartum and other MCH services. As I mentioned, Pakistan's a priority for maternal child health services. You'll see similar levels of funding from USAID for the maternal child health program. So there are opportunities here for building on maternal child health services. And then increasing awareness and commitment, including among religious leaders. And let me just add one more thing, is that in a country like Pakistan, where you have a large segment of your population in the rural areas, and you also have women who live in long distances from the nearest facility, that an important strategy is getting services to the community. And we have the Lady Health Workers Community Midwifery Program as a way to do that, both to get information and services to the community. They can also be change agents in giving accurate information about family planning and being referral agents also to the other health facilities. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Scott. Appreciate it, and thank you to all the panelists. A rich set of presentation gives us lots to think about, lots to talk about. We have a little bit of time. We do that. So we can open it up. My colleagues have microphones. We ask that you use it. I think David Martin from the British Council has a question. Where is David? Right there in the back? Okay, good.
Yes. Is it on? Yes. Oh, good. I just wanted to say, with Michael Kugelman's invitation, a little bit about the British Council and why we're involved in this. The British Council is the United Kingdom's principal agency for cultural relations, and our purpose is to promote trust and engagement for the UK between other countries and the UK through the exchange of knowledge and ideas. Now that trust and engagement is the key, and Pakistan is one of a number of countries where we have a trust deficit. Something like 82% of Pakistanis basically don't trust the UK. Slightly better than America. 89% don't trust America. So how do we address that trust deficit? We decided that we would be doing it through strengthening the consensus against extremism in all its forms. Now, it's extremism in all its forms. That's extremism in the UK as well. We have a rising support for the British National Party, the extreme right wing. And though extremism, I think, is partly driven by a fear and lack of understanding of the other. And so we have a mutual agenda that addresses stereotypes on both sides. We've decided to focus on youth in Pakistan, partly because they are such a large segment of the population. But also I very much agree with Moeed's view this morning that we need to counter alienation and marginalisation amongst our populations, both in the UK and in Pakistan. And so we give young people the opportunity to interact with each other, to engage with people from another culture. It's all about intercultural dialogue, and to provide an alternative to the extremist and very negative narratives. And so that's what the British Council's role in life is. Our Active Citizens programme is one part of that, and the Next Generation report was designed to stimulate policy dialogue as part of that programme. So thanks very much.
Terrific. Why don't we collect a few, given the amount of time? So, Tara, if you could bring one all the way up here to the front, and then we'll get those in the back, and then come over here. So the gentleman right down here in front. I couldn't miss him. He's right in front of me. This is the question.
I just want to compare the two presentations on the youth of Pakistan. And they come up, I think, to some extent, quite distance away from each other in terms of the problems and the solutions. But in a democratic society, you need to work through structures. And youth problems are structural problems. They are not just their views and opinions. How do you address those structural problems without addressing the institutions that have to make policies? You cannot have a separate youth commission, a youth committee making a difference. That can only maybe for advocacy purpose. But if you want to make a change, the change has to come in the colleges, in the schools, in the employment, in the parliaments, where the policies are made, resource allocations are made. You cannot have a separate parallel structures proposed by the British Council report, for example, that you need to have councils and committees. They're all right for advocacy, awareness creation, but the serious problems which have been raised by Moeed this morning, how do you address them? You address them by structural changes, introducing legislation, laws, parliament, changing the whole quality of education in colleges. Because the quality is so bad, as you said in the morning. And where do you get the quality skill development? The skill development requires institutions. So I think we need to really, this is a much serious issue than what the recommendations coming out to youth committees, youth councils, youth groups. I think we need to go and change the education institutions, the resource allocation mechanisms, and the quality of teachers, quality of institutions at the higher and primary level education. I think we need to have much more structural change. That's what the report's points are.
Terrific. Some of the integration that I think some of our speakers made. Okay, Tara, if you go right up the middle, and then Russell, if you could come down while she's doing that for Sarah and back over here. So pre-position, if you could bring yours down there. Right, go right in the middle, Tara, please. I think there's a hand right there. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Zeba A, and I work in the education sector. My question is mostly for Ms. Shahid. First of all, I just wanted to commend you for being an advocate for encouraging such wonderful initiatives for youth participation through the various fora. However, I'm just wondering what initiatives are really tapping into technology, because, as you said, we need a longer-term solution here. And some examples might include, garnering opinions from youth via mobile phones or blogs, etc., or providing opportunities for distance education, data collection, or youth mapping, using programs linked to Google Earth, social and professional networking, and all of that. So if you could just elaborate on what kinds of technologies are being tapped into, and then kind of for the broader panel, I'm just wondering how you're getting the word out there using the different ICT tools and venues, newer venues. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. Technology. Go right here, and then Sarah, and then we'll give you guys a promise. You do get a chance to talk here.
Yeah, Mihira Kara from USAID, Office of Population. It's just a comment. Across several presentations, there has been mention of unmet need and an immediate connection to demand. They're two very different things. Unmet need is a theoretical calculation. Translating that into active demand for contraception, especially the contraception that's available in the country, is very different. And so it still needs active program effort to do that. And that includes lots of things that people have mentioned. Active family planning programs will also increase choice of methods and informed choice. And that takes a lot of program effort. So I just wanted to highlight that because people immediately switch from unmet need to demand, and that's not necessarily the case.
Thank you very much for that excellent reminder. Sarah, why don't we, for this round, give you
two real quick ones. One for Sohail. I never heard you answer why the modern method went down. You showed the proportion, maybe I blanked out, and you did, but I saw that it went down very precipitously, modern method use OCs and so forth, IUDs. And then you disaggregated by public-private, but I don't know why the whole picture went down. I never heard that. And then for Scott, I was wondering, we talked earlier about this bomb and security, and there was some concern about U.S. security involvement in Pakistan. And I was wondering how you do a high priority in global health at the same time that there's basically the U.S. government's interest in security. Thank you.
Okay, so there's a whole bunch of questions there. Would you like to kick us off and give folks kind of a chance to respond? You can pick and choose, divide and conquer, and so forth.
Modern contraceptive use between 2000... Sorry. Yeah, modern contraceptive use between 2003 and 2006 seems to have declined based on 2 national surveys. Nobody's really done a systematic investigation of why that has happened. And it's unclear. Some people think it's because the family planning program monitoring became weaker. But these are all hypotheses. It hasn't been looked at. We don't know.
But you didn't answer that question.
I didn't try to.
Okay. So Zia, would you like to take on some of the youth comments, technology comments?
First, I'd like to respond to this gentleman over here. We're not basically the recommendations that you're talking about in terms of youth committees and forums. I think those are not really the ones that came out from the report itself. The report is talking about more holistically skill development, employment opportunities, education itself, so much broader context than the committees and forums that you mentioned. Also about a policy discourse specifically on focusing on youth itself and seeing how interventions and policies can be established for youth involving young people themselves. So much broader agenda really that we are talking about here. In response to the question with regards to technology, yes, that's a huge challenge that we are facing, and specifically in terms of an outreach that we're looking at. If you're looking at the scale of the population, of direct interaction with a small number of people is just not going to get that impact. So it has to be through technology. Unfortunately, there is about 10% internet penetration at this point in Pakistan, so mostly focused on urban areas. So we are looking at mobile technology, and we're looking at the media, the broadcast media as well, as using internet technology. So all of these things combined together to formulate a strategy which really will create the outreach that we're looking at. Yeah.
Okay. Scott?
Yeah, maybe to start with Sarah's question, for both family planning and maternal child health, the identification of countries is based on a need formula for both those programs, maternal child health and family planning, and the funding that is provided through the what used to be called the Child Survival Fund, but that funding decision is made independently of the political parts of our funding, which is ESF funding. On the information technologies, to say a couple of things is that maybe you were meaning that with respect to youth, and I don't have an example of youth, but we do in a number of countries use the cell phone as a way of reinforcing messages that women get at maternal and child health facilities. So they'll go in and they'll be told if a woman is pregnant, what she needs to do and when she needs to come in for checkups and that kind of thing. And then a reminder is provided through the cell phone. And we found that the clients like that they get reminders, and it reinforces the messages that they received at the clinic. We're also using information technologies for logistics, for commodity logistics, where service delivery sites used to write out their inventory and their request for additional commodities. Now they can do that through the cell phone. And so it makes data transmission much quicker, and then the tabulation is also more error-free.
Yeah, Professor?
Well, the only comment I have that perhaps this cell phone system cannot work in Pakistan because we are trying to reach the poorest of the poor. They are the ones who need to be, whose needs need to be addressed, and so we have to do something else. Recently, Bill Ryerson, who is here, and we had visited Pakistan, talked to various media outlets there. He's the president of Population Media Center, and they have done a wonderful job in Africa and Latin America and promoting demand for family planning services, and it has worked very well there. One thing which amazes me that when we were talking to the officials in family planning program, they say we have unmet need of 27%, and and about 30% or something like that of the women are using contraceptives. So we meet 37% on 27% of the unmet need, and then we'll be achieving our target. But our question was that still there are about 1/3 of the women who are not using contraceptives. I mean, they don't want to use contraceptives, even though about maybe at one time 20% of them would be pregnant, but immediately after delivery they should be practicing birth control. And how to approach them, that's another question, which needs to be addressed. And so so coming back to the information the technology, what role it can play, I don't think the cell phone, although penetration is there, about 50% of the population does have cell phone in Pakistan, but it's only men. So if you have some ways to address men, that's perhaps the way to do it. But if you want to increase the contraceptive use among women, I think some other methodology has to be, we can address that with some other ways. And I'm sure that Population Council is doing this very interesting work through USAID, and they must be looking into that issue too.
There's a couple of questions in the middle, and then we'll come over here.
My name's Sarah Chapin. I'm with the Population Institute. And as we're talking about investing in youth, my question is whether there's an established system of school-based sexual and reproductive health education in Pakistani schools, and if there is, whether you see this as a potential tool for amending the behaviors of this generation, the sexual behaviors of this generation in the future.
Okay, thank you. There's one all the way in the back row. Thank you.
Thank you. One of the things I think only the last presentation mentioned a little bit is the raising awareness. So we talked about, getting from unmet need to demand generation, and BCC is sort of one of the strategies. And for Bangladesh, I know through the 80s and 90s, there were radio and TV ads constantly about having only 2 kids and managing family size. And there was a huge link from the BCC to actual change in behavior, which we've generally talked about but not talked about the strategies. So I'm curious, in the Pakistani context, to what extent are we aware of large-scale campaigns, BCC campaigns, especially for the family planning and reducing TFR? And I know USAID, through some of the programs, there are smaller awareness-raising campaigns, but I'm talking about sort of large-scale national ones. Are there any plans in the works?
And then Tara over here in the well there. Tara's getting a workout today.
Yes, thank you. We've heard about a lot of data this afternoon, or rather all day, and I just wondered if any of the different studies and data that has been presented if we can unpack that by gender. For example, the youth survey that the British Council did, was that disaggregated by gender? Were the responses, was there any difference in the kind of responses that one heard? Because youth is not a homogeneous group in Pakistan. There's a huge diversity along gender, along ethnicity, along urban, rural, etc. So I wondered if there was something over there. And also I think there's a little bit of a problem there when one starts to ask questions like, are you primarily a Pakistani or a Muslim? And I think loaded questions like that then can sort of lend a different sort of nuance to the survey which could skew the perceptions somewhat. I also wondered whether any of the other studies had any data on choices. We talked about, there's been a lot of talk about unmet need and services, etc. Who makes the choices? How are, what the use of family planning, within a family, it's a couple's choice. What is the status of, how is this related to the status of the woman? Where is the involvement of men? Dr. Mehtab mentioned a little bit about men, but however, I would like to correct you that cell phone penetration is widespread even amongst women. So there is technology that has penetrated, and I hope there's some data that can prove that. So I just wondered whether we can unpack some of this data to see where actually the status of women comes out as a key thing in terms of choices, in terms of selection of methods, in terms of all of the data that we have heard today. And finally, just a quick point about religion. I think we need to be a little careful, Dr. Karima, when we start making some kind of generalizations about Muslim countries and correlating them to some forms of behavior in terms of radicalization or the kind of images that we see in the popular press today globally. Thank you.
Russell, if you could go right here to Bill, we'll have that last one, then give our panel a chance to respond.
Bill Ryerson, President of Population Media Center and Population Institute. As Mehtab mentioned, we spent a week in Pakistan 2 weeks ago. And just in follow-up to the comment about BCC, my reading of the most recent Demographic and Health Survey is that unless family size norms are changed, the demographic profile of Pakistan will not change, because the fertility rate now is 4.0. Ideal number of children among married men and women is 4.1. Among the 78% non-users of contraception, a majority say they never intend to use family planning. So indeed there is unmet need, there is some unmet demand, but addressing those issues I've just mentioned are going to require role modeling through entertainment communications of small family norms, relative safety of family planning use, and particularly self-efficacy, since the leading reason for non-use, as measured by the DHS, is the belief that the number of children one has is up to God. So getting people to believe that they have the right and the ability to affect the outcome of their family size and spacing of children is critical to changing the demographic trends in Pakistan.
Okay, I have the question about the school education curriculum, strategies and campaigns, and in terms of the broad brush ones, disaggregating data by gender and some of the related questions there, and then this last comment about perceived optimum family size and such. Give our panel a chance to, again, pick and choose and respond.
Okay. I have a comment on two of the questions. One was about national advertising campaigns. And there are some national advertising campaigns now. In one of the slides, I did in fact show that a social marketing campaign conducted in 2009 increased the condom use by 10%, consistent condom use by 10 percentage points amongst those exposed. Unfortunately, there are very few campaigns which are actually evaluated. So that is a problem. So there is increasing interest in campaigns through social marketing, through other projects for maternal child health. Very few have actually been evaluated in terms of the history of these campaigns, but the little bit that we do know, it seems to suggest that they are effective. Second comment about gender and the involvement of men. I think it's a very interesting thing. Again, a slide that I showed basically that the only reversible modern method of contraception which has consistently increased since 1975 is a male method, the condom. So, I mean, that gives you some idea. The other methods which basically are very important, which in terms of main involvement, are the traditional methods. That's another, if you group them together, I didn't show that in my graph, if you group them together, they are a very important method in Pakistan. It's also interesting that people who have the highest level of education, women with secondary education in Pakistan, 65% of those women who should, in principle, have access, because these are the most educated, most urban women, they are either using condoms or traditional methods. So it's another interesting kind of fact that involvement of men is actually there in terms of where methods have succeeded, which is condoms and traditional methods. You can't have them succeed without the involvement of men.
In response to the question about the data about on the youth report, it was disaggregated according to gender, but the responses, there was no significant difference in responses. The survey itself was conducted by Nielsen, and secondly, in terms of the question around how they viewed themselves, it was not a direct question. It was a question asking them about how they felt, how they identified themselves. So it was a question on identity itself, and I can share the tool with you later on if you're interested. So there was no direct question asked whether they felt that they were Muslims or Pakistanis, really.
Just a general comment. I agree with what a number of people have said, that behavior change communication is a very important element of successful programs. And that can include media and sort of nationwide types of BCC, also community level theater and other types of outlets like that. And then also important is interpersonal communication. And one of the reasons that I think this community-based providers is critical is not just to get the commodities or the services out there, but to get information out there about the importance of spacing births, delaying pregnancy, health benefits, and also demystifying family planning, or getting rid of the myths that are often out there. And I think also part of behavior change and education encompasses religious leaders, and also working with men is very important. So male involvement. I know that we, as you mentioned, social marketing always has a major BCC component to it, and I guess I'm not as familiar with the program to know if there are other behavior change activity.
The Falah program that you're supporting, where the prime is doing exactly that. We're working with men, and it involves interpersonal communication, and we have a mass media campaign that's being aired right now on all the channels. And I think the main contribution that we're making is really promoting birth spacing as a health intervention. And this is very acceptable because all the religious leaders are coming forth and endorsing it. The medical establishment is good. So I think there is a huge change.
Yeah, just to add that usually you see the highest unmet need, or the need being postpartum. And so that's a key entry point for getting family planning.
Healthy spacing.
And it can be breastfeeding, too, promoting breastfeeding as a way of birth spacing.
And it becomes immediately acceptable, this campaign, and it really addresses the religious thing because it's so much within Islam. I think somebody showed a slide on that. I think Mehtab, and also vis-a-vis generally, I think somebody mentioned those who never want to use, I think it was a previous speaker, that the ideal family size, I'm quite surprised. I think it has always been about 3, so I'm quite surprised that you got 4. But I think in terms of dispelling some of the reasons why women don't, or families are averse to using family planning, is really done away with if you promote it as birth spacing, just increasing spacing between births, and not use the word family planning, because that implies limitation.
Yeah, well, glad Sarah did ask me a question about related to, was it violence or something among youth? Well, I have these numbers here about, we have about 56 million young men and women in Pakistan. That's about more than 30% of the country's population. I think that our population is 185 million anyways. So if that is the base with about 56 million, and just give them half and half, so we have about about 28 million young men That's more than the population of Afghanistan and Iraq. Both of them have fewer people altogether. And our Federal Bureau of Statistics suggests reports, or Planning Commission, or wherever it comes from, that about 15% of them are unemployed. I think it's a lower figure because it's much higher. I did a survey in Karachi in 2007, and then about 30% of young people, they said that they are doing nothing. They're not in college, they're not in working. So I would say roughly about between 5 to 6 million young men are unemployed, or they're doing nothing. And I think then Richard is one of the, earlier, he has done quite a bit of work on that. And there's a lot of information available, or a lot of research done by political scientists mainly, on how the youth bulge if they're not doing anything. And we know that only 3% of this age cohort is in college. So what we are talking about, that a lot of potentials for them to go astray. In any way they could go. And I think there's a great potential to, I didn't say that they are involved in violence, I said they could be. And I think I still subscribe to that theory, and I'm sure that I was in Pakistan partly also to do this piloting of a survey of youth in Pakistan in many cities. And it appears from the data which I have seen, about 400 or 500 young men who were interviewed, that they are potentials because they are. And I think that's also coming from a British Council study, that yes, there's a great deal of disenchantment among young people, or young men particularly. They don't know where they're going. They don't see much future. And it could be true for any country, irrespective of whether they're Muslims or whatever religion they're following, and no religion at all. If there's a great deal of disenchantment, if they think that there's not much for them in future to do, if there's a high rate of unemployment, even in this country, when I came in the 1970s, that was true for the black young men in this country, which has changed since then. So things could change, but I talk about potentials. There's another potential that they get married, they're not using contraceptives. They do get married early, by the way. Even among men, I think the average age of marriage is about 25, 26. And so they're not using contraceptives. So they have substantial growth potentials demographically, and otherwise they have other potentials, which could be anything. So I still think I do subscribe to the literature which is available from the political scientists. Actually, one of the persons, Jack Goldstone at George Mason University, and we are doing this major project in the Muslim world, seeing that how far that's correct, interviewing young men in many countries. So, of course, that's Dr. Nizam, Vice Chancellor of Gujarat University, and we have been talking about this for the last 3 years. There's so much dearth of information available. Research is not there. A lot of course, because if the researchers don't do research, then newspaper columnists or correspondents could go and talk to a few people, and they will come up with their own stories. So that needs to be done, and I'm sure that people are doing that. British Council has done the kind of work which our scholars should be doing in Pakistan, by the way. And I think that there's some very, very important issues which they have addressed. I do believe that their sample size is small. 1,500 you cannot disaggregate that data for provinces, because the situation is very different in Punjab than in Frontier and in Balochistan, or even in Karachi, where I come from. So you need to do more, local area studies, and I'm sure that that needs to be done. So till then, we have to rely on whatever the hypotheses are. So the hypothesis we have here, that there's a great potentials of violence among these young men, not women. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Professor, and thank you, panelists, and some excellent questions. Tara, could you give Bob Hathaway, our Asia Program Director, a microphone, or he can grab one there, for the last words in our closing of the conference?
Jeff, the last words, and I promise very brief words. It's easy to get discouraged about Pakistan. One of the takeaways I take away from our session today is that in this instance there's a lot of reason to be optimistic. I think that was a message that we heard again and again from almost all of our speakers. Yes, Pakistan's demographic profile contains some serious risk, including potential for violence. But there's also a different type of potential there, and I think that's something worth remembering as we go our separate ways, but I hope not forget what we've heard, and as many of you wrestle with how we move forward. There is reason to be to think of this as an opportunity as well as simply a problem. I was struck because there seemed to me to be a lot of overlap among the speakers as to what are the reasonable steps that ought to be done. How can we address some of these challenges, and how can we turn some of the challenges into opportunities? I think we're going to probably argue among ourselves, but I think that argument in many respects is just at the margins. I spent a fair amount of my time wrestling with security issues, and whether you're talking about Afghanistan or Pakistan, there's just not that same overlap. There's not that same consensus. Analysts are all over the map in trying to define the problem and then figure what a solution is. And part of my cheerfulness about today is because I did think there was so much overlap. A lot of it has been mentioned repeatedly, has to do not with what should we be doing, but how do we do it? Or what's the implementation of policies on which we largely agree. If there was one element that was not highlighted perhaps as much as I would have liked to have seen it today, it's the elusive quality of leadership. Political leadership, leadership from civil society, from our academic experts, many of whom are in this room, leadership from the private sector, and not least of all, in my humble opinion, leadership from Pakistan's unruly media, which we all recognize is a powerful force for influencing public opinion in Pakistan. And one would like to think, maybe I'm naive, but one would like to think that leading voices in the media could help encourage an informed debate and discussion on this set of issues. Leadership means selection of priorities, choosing from among priorities, and these aren't necessarily easy choices. Leadership, in my judgment, means providing adequate resources. It means following through, not simply creating the policies and then leaving it to someone else to implement them. Many of the leaders in this discussion are in this room. Some of them have spoken today, but others, actual or next generation leaders, weren't necessarily our featured speakers today. I want to go away simply saying I commend all of you. I was sitting here a minute ago. I think I've organized more than 5,000 events at the Wilson Center over the years. This is an extraordinary turnout at 4:45 in the afternoon when we started early in the morning. That says something, I think, about you all. I think it says something about your commitment, about your recognition of the importance of this issue. Obviously, it says something about the caliber of the speakers we've had all day long, without exception. In a minute, not quite yet, I'm going to ask you to join me in a last round of applause for all our speakers, but I also want you to applaud yourselves for your dedication to this issue as well. Before we get to that, let me just say one other last thing, and there's, Jeff, before you got here this morning, I publicly thank you and your team, Megan, I want to reiterate what I said about my team, and particularly Michael. Just did a terrific job in putting this whole thing together. I need to once again, but I also want to once again thank the Fellowship Fund for Pakistan, which has made all of this possible. And very last thing, please now do join me in a round of applause for all our speakers throughout the day.